Welcome to the Power of Coaching. I am Hardy Brooklyn, a life coach based in Brooklyn, New York, that helps people live an authentic life in a truly authentic world through techniques like setting boundaries and understanding your own limiting beliefs. Anna, tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
Thank you, Hardy. Hello, I am Anna. I am a life coach. I live in Italy, Milan, and I help moms to thrive after their kids leave by reimagining, recreating, and redesigning their lives with purpose and fulfillment. And Stan.
Thanks, Anna. I'm all the way over here in Perth, Western Australia. I help people create extraordinary lives by helping them move forward and get unstuck. Over to you, Isabel.
Thanks, Stan. Sorry, I can't make it today. I'm Isabel Nanin, and I'm a women's empowerment coach. I help professional, introverted women and female entrepreneurs to turn their fears into success. So enjoy yourself today, and back to Hardy.
Thank you, Isabel. We're going to kick off this episode really quickly and get right down into the meat of it. We're going to recap a workshop that I did the past week, as well as a practice session that we did around boundaries. Those are very compelling processes, workshops, and practice sessions where we got really deep into the meat of it. Stan, what did you think of that?
I really enjoyed it, Hardy. And this week we are going to turn it around because Hardy's generally asked us the questions. We're going to ask him the questions today. So, Hardy, you actually have a very varied background. You want to give us a small snapshot of your life?
My life is somebody that lives authentically. I started early in life as a caterer. I moved from food catering, kosher food catering, into technology. I specialized in the music festival world and power generation. While I was doing that, had a very flexible schedule. So I did lots of other things, like I was a zipline rescue guide, an aerial sports rescue guide. I was a FIFA soccer referee. I did lots of different certifications, anything that instilled my soul, that made me or distracted me from the realities that I wasn't setting boundaries in my life. And as I progressed, I started taking classes after I missed all of the signals and the signs of the mental struggles that my children were going through.
Thanks, Hardy. Now, how did you get started in as a boundaries and consent facilitator?
A lot of that came around after my son went through a major mental situation where I kind of missed it. And I thought I was this all embracing guy, this great dad, and everything. Everybody said, "You're the greatest dad in the world." But I missed so many things because of my own limiting beliefs, my own preconceived notions, and my own way that I was so brainwashed into dealing with certain situations that I didn't see it. And what that did was that forced me to look outward. And New York City was running a program for mental health first responders. They were looking for people to come on a team to respond to situations when people were having mental health crisis. And I'm like, perfect. I'm having a mental health crisis. Let me learn all I can. And I went into this program and I took all of the classes and all the certifications for all of the different age groups for mental health problems. And that opened my eyes up to how bad everybody around me was working with boundaries, including the boundary experts, the people that said they were consent experts. I thought I was good with boundaries. And when I walked out of those classes, and then after I took two Zoom classes after that, I was like, wow, I really sucked. And I started working on myself. I started understanding where I was pushing people's boundaries, where I was violating people's boundaries by my behavior, for acting out because of limiting beliefs. And all of that led me to the path of looking at coaching to try to improve myself.
Good.
Very good.
So that's a very interesting story. And what made you decide in the end to become a life coach?
After I had taken two different life coaching certifications, a bunch of my friends were like, "Yeah, you've been a mentor to me. You've been like a coach to me." I'm like, "You have those conversations with everybody all the time." Why not bring that out of it and make that your career? Because you do have a knack for not caring what people say. And when working in the boundary space, I was able to kind of relate that to the coaching world. And then my power job kind of faded away because I was becoming more artistic in my soul. And people with that wealth are not friends, do not associate with people like me. They made that perfectly clear. I'm a different breed. They might invest in my art, but that's about it. We're not going to hire you because you're an artist anymore. You can't be our business consultant and an artist. And I jumped in with both feet. I started doing boundaries workshops all over the country. And then the pandemic hit, and then I started doing boundaries workshops on Zoom.
Caught up with the rest of the world.
And then I met people like you.
So the other day, Hardy, last Wednesday, you ran a boundaries workshop, and we just did our coaching practice group on Tuesday, all dealing with boundaries. Do you want to give us a quick overview or summary of boundaries in particular? Like, what are boundaries?
So the biggest thing the takeaway was there was a really blurred line for the attendees of both the workshop and the practice session around the difference between boundaries and consent and between boundaries and rules. A boundary is a rule that you set on yourself. A boundary has nothing to do with the other person. Basically, what that boundary is if somebody behaves in a certain way, speaks in a certain way, acts in a certain way, does something in a certain way that triggers me, makes me feel uncomfortable, I will not put myself in that situation. We're not asking that person to change their behavior. We're not asking that person to change what they're saying. We're saying, I am going to take myself out of a situation that I do not feel comfortable in, that's in my boundary realm. And an interesting thing to say, a very simple, easy boundary is, I don't like the way my parents talk to my son about his career and his future. So it makes me uncomfortable. So what do? I don't bring him when I go out to see them.
Now, I think on in the workshop you mentioned there was 4 or 5 different types of boundaries. Do you want to recap those for us, Hardy?
So there are basically 4 fundamental types of boundaries. One is material things, physical things, time, favor, services. Those are like tangible items that we can kind of wrap our hands around. The next is physical and sexual, my body, my personal space, touching, kinks. What am I okay looking at as far as in another person? The third one is mental. What are my thoughts? What are my values? What are my opinions and what are my beliefs? Do they differ greatly? Am I going to put myself in a situation where I'm surrounding myself with people that are anti-environment and I'm pro-environment? And then the last one is emotional, your feelings and other people's feelings. And that is the biggest one that people have trouble fermenting. Your feelings, other people's feelings. There was nothing wrong with my parents communicating to my son about his future and his career and all those things. The situation I had was I felt that they're not seeing him for who he was and who he is and who he wants to be on his own path and his own journey. And trying to constantly tell someone to change their path and their journey doesn't make me comfortable, whether it's a trigger in me, whatever it is. So he doesn't feel good, makes me not feel good. I don't like the conversation. That's all feelings. Nobody can see any of that. So that boundary is super hard to set, super hard to explain.
Now, what about coaching people on boundaries? How do we go about coaching people on boundaries?
It's a lot of deep work, and people have to admit things that they're not willing to admit about what they like, what they don't like, and be willing to stand up for them. When I start coaching, the first things I ask is, when you interact with a person, name 5 things that make you feel positive energy. Then name the 5 things that make you feel negative energy from that person. And then how do we reframe those 5 negative things as a positive boundary?
So let me get this straight. So you got the 5 positive things, you got the 5 negative things, and we're reframing the negative things as a boundary.
So a good boundary is I don't go on a bicycle with people that don't wear bike helmets or ride recklessly because of the consequences and that's the boundary that a lot of people have.
Yeah.
So how do I reframe that statement so that it's a positive statement towards a positive boundary so that I can explain it to the people that I'm with so they don't feel like I'm putting a rule on them? And the way that I ask the questions is, who do you like to ride with? I prefer to ride with people that wear helmets that have reflective stickers on it, that have bright colored clothing, that respect safety over flair or speed or efficiency. So now I'm not telling the person, I don't like your behavior. I'm telling the person, I only ride with people that respect safety first, that wear helmets, that respect traffic laws, that to respect the speed limit, that respect the pedestrians, respect the cars, and there are people that I no longer have the ability of bike riding with because I, for some reason in my soul, have to just go. When I get on that bike, I'm just going. Doesn't matter how drunk I am, how high I am, or where I'm going, or how far it is. I don't think. I get on and I go because I've been hit a lot and put in the hospital a lot. And I feel like I'm invincible when I'm on a bicycle.
Hopefully you're not, and it's good that you're wearing your helmet. I think Anna has some questions about boundaries for you. She's busy laughing at your cycle jokes.
Yeah.
And that's what you have to do with your clients. You have to bring humor. You have to make it light. You have to make it fun. Because if you don't, it starts just getting this place where, why am I putting all these rules on myself? Why am I getting rid of these people? Because there are some people in life that say boundaries are something that you need to learn from. You need to let people violate them and see how you interact and learn from that. And there are certain times where you have to let people violate your boundaries to see how you react to it. Again, not if it's a safety thing. Maybe if it's your values or your beliefs, your opinions. Maybe it's letting somebody borrow your truck. Maybe it's giving somebody that you normally wouldn't help assistance because they're in a different social class. But there are certain times where maybe a boundary has a lot of preconceived notions and limiting beliefs behind it that can be changed by other people's behavior. And just one thing when you're thinking and working with clients, think about that because the way that I react and interact with certain people is very different. And I have a very different set of boundaries with different groups of people.
Yeah. So my next question to you would be, what are some differences when you coach introverts versus extroverts?
In the boundary space, there's a lot because introverts, as we all know, are very introverted. They don't want to go out. They don't want to interact with people. They don't want to be approached. So I work with introverts to figure out how we can use body language to give the first signal of the boundary and how to get them to speak that voice. Because for an introvert, if they get the confidence and they feel that their boundary is real and that it's going to be heard, they are going to enforce it because they are going to be in a more pleasant place. If you're an introvert, you don't want to ask too many negative questions around boundaries because that will shut them down. You also want to think about doing it in smaller chunks. So for my introvert clients, if we're doing boundary working, there might be 1 or 2 questions per session, and that's it. Because it takes them a little bit longer to absorb it. Because it's about them protecting themselves in a situation they don't even want to be in to begin with. So we're taking somebody and saying, hey, I'm an introvert, but I have to go to this corporate board meeting. I hate big group meetings. How do we get them to A, get the courage to go to the meeting in a positive manner, B, set boundaries on how people interact with them, talk to them before and after the meeting, and what are the processes that we're going to use after the meeting to figure out how I protected my boundaries? Did I protect the right boundaries, or do I have to change my strategy? Because with different people, everything is different.
And that's
So
a
I
lot
start,
to cover. That's a lot to cover in a session, or even
yes.
several sessions.
And that's why with introverts, I break it down. So the first session, I might ask, let's define a boundary for you. And all we're working on is defining boundaries for that person, as far as what the word means, how it means it, and how they're going to speak their voice when it gets violated. That's session one. Then we'll do some regular coaching. 2 weeks later, we come back and we do session two. It's a regular coaching session, but then they get another question in their boundaries booklet. What is one thing that makes you comfortable when you want to be the biggest introvert?
And I like that idea of just building their book up. That's as a coach, is sometimes, you know, everyone thinks, you know, wow, we'll get it done, and you're like, no, that's why it takes 6 weeks. We got to have time to kind of build into your book, as Hardy just said.
And again, a lot of those aha moments in coaching, you can get that aha moment, but it's how do I implement? How do I apply that aha moment? How do I maintain accountability around that aha moment? And that's where the coach comes in place, is because we're following up with you. We're working with you to make sure that aha moment isn't just a blip on the horizon.
Very easy to
Exactly.
bypass that sometimes.
Yeah. It takes time to make changes, you know, that last. It's not a one quick fix. So my next question on that thread would be, how about women and men? What's the differences in their boundaries?
There's a the boundaries are the same. The biggest difference is how different cultures interpret them. So here in America, it's very easy for a man to set and enforce a boundary when they understand them and when they want to do it. Women, on the other hand, depending on where you are in the social circles you are in, it is a little harder for women to set boundaries. They are getting better at it, but I really ask women, for women, they have to use more of a body language in conjunction with their words. Where men, a lot of times, body language is more than enough. You know, get away from me. Shut up. You know, women have to do zip it. Men just do. So when I ask them questions, I say, when are situations that you feel like you are not being your true, authentic self? When do you feel that somebody is making your anxiety trigger or making your stomach just not feel 100%? And when we start thinking about boundaries around that, then the next question is, what behavior does that person have to make my stomach feel 100%? So if the behavior is looking at my tits, slapping my ass, whatever it might be, it doesn't matter. It might be constantly looking across the office at me. Whatever behavior that is, how do I change what I expect from that behavior to be something that's going to make me feel positive? So one example might be, instead of slapping my ass, compliment me on something I wrote in the last week. Instead of glaring at me, come over and have a conversation, introduce yourself to me, talk to me. Don't just look at me like a piece of meat. And how do I rephrase those in a positive space? Well, I only go out for drinks with people that have conversations with me and talk to me and don't just stare me down. that come across to me as being sincerely interested in me, that actively listen to me when I speak.
Mhm. Yeah, interesting. And what do you think could be some of the best ways of communicating our boundaries in a healthy way?
And that varies by district, street, house, culture, everything.
Mhm.
The one thing that I've learned is in all cultures, the written word tends to work the best. So I am very good at communicating my boundaries vocally. That gets me so far. I can send an email. That gets me so far. I can send a text message or some kind of other messaging system. But if I take the time to take out a piece of paper and a pen or a pencil and write down my boundary for myself, it makes it easier for me to explain to others. And there are times where I might take a draft a note and say, hey, I do not go out with people that drink before they eat because then they become angry drunks. So we need to go get dinner before you're going to start your alcohol consumption. I don't go out with people that constantly tap me on the top of my head. Right? So, and that allows you to set boundaries with people, or I only go out with people that don't touch my head. And again, every boundary, you have to think about it. How is the other person going to receive your action of enforcing it? And how can I take that enforcement and make it a positive thing instead of a negative thing? Showing them how it's going to improve my relationship, how it's going to improve our relationship. That's what boundaries are there for. Boundaries are there to improve relationships, improve communication, and improve happiness.
Yeah.
And these were some of the things that we came out in the last workshop and the last coaching practice session is how do we learn from boundaries? How do we set boundaries? And how do we set them in a positive manner?
And on that, how do you create boundaries in the positive instead of the negative? Because I was probably like everybody else. I think boundaries are sometimes a negative, like a wall. And you were mentioning about making it fun, and I was like, oh, that's an interesting way of looking at it.
A good way of putting it is give a very simple example. And that example is I am going to have a better time. I am going to feel more engaged. I'm going to feel closer to you. I'm going to feel more authentic with you when I don't put myself in situations that trigger me. And what are those situations? It might be, so for instance, let's take Anna, for example. Anna is a female. Anna says, hey, I don't put myself in a situation where people are constantly grabbing my breasts because that makes her uncomfortable. That makes her
Sure.
giggle. So how does she word that? I don't put myself in a space where people don't respect my personal space to my level of it. So instead of saying, I don't put myself in a room where people grab my tits, I don't interact with people that don't respect my personal space.
And that's way more powerful.
Yeah.
I think we're just about out of time at the moment. Hardy, what are we coming up with next week?
So next week at 2:30 GMT, 9:30 New York Eastern Standard Time, we have our next amazing workshop where we're going to be talking about developing confidence, which continues on the path, setting the boundary. Now, how do we become more confident moving forward in life? And that's going to be on November 14th at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, 2:30 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. And Stan, what time is it in Australia that day?
It'll be 10:30 a.m. Western Australian Standard Time here.
And what
So
time will it be in Italy, Anna?
It will be 15:30.
in the
3:30
afternoon.
p.m. 15:30, yeah, it's afternoon.
Thank you, everyone. This has been another episode of The Power of Coaching, brought to you by the Daring Success Team. We hope to see you on November 14th, 2023 at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Bye.
Oh, bye.